Welcome to the podcast, A Different Lens, produced by the Hampton Institute, a working class think tank. Today it is January 13th, 2014, and for the first interview of the new year, we're talking with Christine Mazzarino, our Education Department Chair. How are you doing today, Christine?
I'm well, Devin. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Um, Today we're going to be discussing her uh, article entitled Opting Out: Grassroots Opposition to Standardization and High Stakes Testing. Before we go into this, however, I wanted to ask you a question I ask all of our chairs, which is, can you tell us about yourself and how you came to be involved with the Hampton Institute?
I am an educator. I started out in math education. I got into curriculum development. I got into some union work. I got into some professional development. And I became involved with Hampton Institute through a connection who knows Colin. And I'm just very excited to be a part of this really meaningful project.
All right, that's awesome. That's good to hear. So yeah, let's start the interview. So you go in the article, you go and you talk about um, grassroots opposition, high stakes testing. But I have a question about that, which is why is there this so much emphasis on standardized testing when it's a one-time deal? For example, colleges and SAT scores. They don't. When it comes to colleges and SAT scores play a role, but not such a big role as people make it out to be. So why is there so much emphasis on standardized testing?
The emphasis on standardized testing began as No Child Left Behind became enacted, and it required standardized testing of all students in mathematics and English language arts, starting in third grade every single year. And as a result, there's been a lot of narrowing of the curriculum and a lot of issues with teachers' evaluations being linked to testing, and therefore teachers trying to include the scope of the test in the classroom more so than richness, because it directly affects their evaluations and their boss or their principal's evaluations as well. So we're having a lot of issues in classrooms across America right now in that vein because the parents want not just the snapshot, as you said, or that one moment in time. They want to know what's going on in the long term in the classroom. They're not interested so much in that 1 or 2 days of testing, or in some states, it's 3 to 8 or 10 days of testing each year.
Okay. Um, and what has been the effect of standardized testing on children's learning?
Well, every child learns differently, and in the public school system, we are obligated to educate every single child, no matter what their learning ability, no matter what their level, and no matter what they're coming to us knowing as far as their prior knowledge. So, the way that it's affecting students is, first of all, the students are feeling the extreme pressure to take these tests and to perform on these tests. And we're seeing a lot of students as young as 8 and 10 years old crying over testing, having extreme anxiety under testing, when those students really should just be forming their foundation for learning and a love of learning that will hopefully take them through not just elementary school, but upper school, middle school, high school, and college.
Okay. Um, Now, you also brought up in the article, you talk about some of the corporations are being involved in these educational forums, such as standardized testing. So, how and why are they doing this? Uh, and specifically, what are their roles? And can you kind of speak kind of how this has changed the culture of the school? Because to me, it seems that with this standardized testing and these evaluations, it seems more that the school is more and more becoming kind of in a way like a corporation. You go, you take these main tests, you have your reviews, you either pass the review or you don't, and if you don't, you're punished.
So to go back, there's a big effect on the schools in the sense that the schools are working on creating results on these tests. Just point blank, the schools need results because otherwise the schools risk being punished. And by punished, I mean losing funding, being phased out, the schools shrinking, teachers being fired, principals being fired, and new schools being brought in. And this idea of new schools is a challenging one because new doesn't necessarily mean better. And in many communities, we're really disadvantaging students who are English language learners or special needs students because they're not always comfortable testing in a formal setting, and they might perform better in other settings, especially given that they're coming to the classroom with different types of needs than the other learners around them. So there's a lot of anxiety around the entire idea right now, and the way that that's trickling down is from the superintendents, higher administration, down to the administrators in the building level, down to the teachers, and then down to the students. And parents have been noticing this. Parents are getting a little bit tired of this situation. They're noticing what's going on with their children, and they're banding together and speaking out against this excessive testing regimen that the students are experiencing.
Okay. You mentioned just now that some people learn in different ways. Wait, sorry. You mentioned now that some people learn in different ways. Could you kind of go deeper into that? Because generally speaking, even at the college level, even I've noticed when I was going to college level, it's just kind of that same um, script of you go, you memorize what's in the book, or you memorize what you wrote, what was on the board, you spit it back out on paper, and and you get a grade. So, that's essentially how people so-called learn. So, do you mind talking about kind of going in depth about different ways people learn?
Absolutely. At the college level, undisputably, there's a lot of you attend class, you take the notes, you take the test, and you pass, or you take the notes, you do a project, and hopefully you pass based on the work that you've done. Whereas in college, most of us have developed more or less cognitively into our adult selves. With students younger than that, especially in the elementary and middle school age, they are still developing cognitively. So they need to be engaged in different ways with learning materials. So some students might need to learn through experience, through doing activities. Some students are visual learners where they need to see things modeled for them. Some students prefer to work in groups. Some students prefer to work independently. And while we're trying to equip students with those skills to eventually go to college and engage in college in the way that is expected, we still need to take the time to create that love of learning for students who are younger and not quite ready cognitively for that level of engagement and discipline.
Okay. Um, at the core of this, there seems to be a debate about education, about what education is and what its goals should be. So, to you, how would you define education? What is it to you? What do you think are some of the purposes of education?
I think the purpose of education is to create an informed, productive citizen. And for every person, that's different because every person is going to walk down a different path in life. And I think one of the most essential parts of education is access and equity, or rather, our access and equity. And the reason I feel that way is because many times we see schools in different neighborhoods that have different funding because of different taxpayer bases, and they don't have access to the same resources or the same number of staff members because of funding. And we don't always have equitable situations in those schools. So there are students who don't have access to those types of opportunities that other students do. So I think that that's an issue towards creating that informed, productive citizenry. And my goal is to help bring about some change that will foster that informed citizenry that can be productive in society no matter what career path they choose.
Okay. Do you mind going kind of defining the term productive citizen, at least as you see it? Usually when I hear the term productive citizen, I kind of get am weary of it in a
Mm,
sense, because usually when I hear productive citizen, to me it essentially means drone. You know, you go out and you do the same thing. You go to college, you get a job, and you know, vote Democrat, Republican. You don't stir up the pot or anything. You just go along with the flow. You know, and that at least that seems what that term kind of is taken on, rather than actually going and trying to make a real difference in the world. So, how would you define what a productive citizen is?
Thank you for bringing that up because I wouldn't want it to be mistaken that I think that all students need to walk the same path. I certainly don't think that every child needs to walk in that vein and needs to become a quote unquote corporate drone, let's say. I think it's essential that when we're thinking about productive citizenry, we're thinking about the freedom of people to choose their path, whether their path be as an entrepreneur, whether that path be as if they choose a business person, whether that path be as an academic, whether it be as an innovator, whether it be as a person who is a housewife or a house husband and stays at home. It's the idea for me of being productive in the life that you choose. And I think that education should enable you to have the tools to make those choices for yourself.
Okay, I definitely agree with that. Definitely, people do need to be able to make decisions for themselves rather than going to being in that um, cookie cutter pattern. I just want to have another question. I have another question. In regards to this whole standardized education test debate, um, it seems that we've kind of seen a growth in homeschooling, or at least a growth kind of in the in the discussion about homeschooling over the past couple of years, and kind of has that in some ways been a response to people being fed up with standardized testing, or um, is it something else entirely?
I would have to say it's absolutely a reaction to standardized testing. I have worked with students who had recently returned from homeschool, and their parents directly told me that they kept their children home from school and did it themselves to avoid the stress of standardized testing, especially in the elementary grades, because the parents wanted to create a nurturing learning environment for the student and guarantee that there would not be an obsession or a focus or an emphasis on the test depending on where the student would be attending school. So homeschooling is definitely a reaction, and I think that the larger economy points to that too, because I think economic conditions are not necessarily conducive at the moment to one parent staying home and working as a homeschool teacher with their child.
Yeah. Now you just talked about, sorry for going in and kind of taking what you're saying and picking it out, but I bring up some really good points here and some stuff I definitely think needs to be explored. So you just said there was a nurturing learning environment. The parents want their kids to have that, and kind of first of all, what do you see at your school, or if you can say that, not get in trouble or anything, in terms of a nurturing, having that kind of nurturing environment, because a lot of the time it seems that just due to not just standardized testing, but just the general uh, pressure, social pressure, people aren't able to get that, nurturing environment, whether, um, it's because of at home, because problems at home, or because of being bullied at school. For example, you have, a number of cases where, for example, LGBT kids are, bullied at school, and some actually go to the point of suicide, unfortunately. So, what do you see kind of at your school that kind of deals with that, and how can we make whether it be professors or teachers or just students, how can we help to make a more nurturing learning environment for everyone.
I think that especially at the middle and high school level, you really unfortunately do see a lot of those social pressures. You see a lot of bullying. You see a lot of issues, be them socioeconomic, sexuality based, academic based, and tensions between the students. And it becomes a situation where student image becomes very important, and it's a scenario where teachers are not always able to address those issues in the classroom because these are issues that happen sometimes between classes, in the hallway passing, and in the cafeteria. Um, and I want to be clear that there are in schools some services meant to support students in this way, such as guidance counselors, grief counselors, drug counselors, but it's, to my understanding, not nearly the type of support that students need. And I've seen situations where there's as many as 500 plus students for one guidance counselor. So thinking about that and the level of issues that can arise is definitely a concern for parents. And while teachers can make sure that yes, these issues are minimized or eliminated from the classroom, the student is only in front of that teacher for 40 minutes a day. The rest of the school day is not up to the teacher's discretion. And I think it becomes a real challenge to create that nurturing, supportive environment as the students develop into the people that they are.
Um, so yeah, but yeah, I agree. That's definitely important, and it's difficult for teachers to go and try and help, just because, like you're saying, they're only uh, you know, they're only in front of the kids for a certain amount of time, and they can't really um, do anything, unfortunately. But I think that then that kind of is then up to, in some ways, the students, um, not just the student that's being bullied, but just the students, other students around who see the bullying to stand up and uh, do something. Because at least my view is that if someone's being bullied, one, you should stop, not just to help that person, but just you. But on a larger level, you have a moral responsibility to do that, and I think that like isn't really instilled in people today, unfortunately. Like,
I'd like to comment on that. There are in the school that I worked in, we have some anti-bullying awareness, and we do try to raise awareness using rubber bracelets, talking about bullying, what it means, and what it means to be allowing a bully to engage in that type of behavior. So students are taught that if they're privy to somebody being a bully, if they are not trying to actively interrupt that behavior and turn it around into a more comfortable, positive behavior, they become complicit in the bullying. And so we try to teach that and instill that starting in elementary school and moving up into middle school because it's just such an important issue. And it's just, especially with social media and students constantly being connected like that when they go home, it becomes so important because I can't tell you how many times students have come to me with issues related to cell phones and photos and Facebook and all kinds of social media.
definitely, social media is just a major problem because we're now seeing like the rise of cyber bullying and whatnot. Just around in general, and creating some major problems. But I want to go now and ask you another question. Because a lot of what we're seeing in schools, just in general, is we're seeing a lot. We're seeing a lot of cutting in extracurricular activities, such as the arts, music, and stuff. I just want to say they promote. Wait, sorry. First, one, it's extremely ironic. I find, um, because we go and we say, we support education, we care so much about education, but then that's the first thing we cut. And then on top of that, we go and we cut education. We cut things like the arts, cut things like music, and it's just strange. It's kind of a hierarchy, kind of, if you will, of education where some education is worth more than others, which is very strange to me. But I want to ask you, to A, if you have anything to say about what I just, if you want to go off of that, then do. Also, my question as well is this cutting of extracurricular activities and the arts, does it have any impact on the ability of kids to think creatively, think outside the box and solve problems?
Absolutely, there's a big effect on the student body, and I think that unfortunately, um, it is systemic of the No Child Left Behind and subsequent Race to the Top legislation. When you create funding mandates that are connected directly to math and English language arts testing, there's going to be a repercussion, and that repercussion is there's a massive focus on math and language arts, and other things fall by the wayside. So not just our after school sports, art programs, and other types of extracurriculars being cut, they're being cut for a variety of reasons, and they're stifling student creativity. So some of those reasons will include, yes, there are budget cuts, but a huge amount of money in these schools is going into the standardized testing programs, preparing for the test, buying materials to prepare for the test, staffing the schools for the test, grading the tests, creating information management systems when the tests are graded to be able to look at the data accumulated from the tests, and then redistributing the data and aggregating it for the school communities that have engaged in them. And because of the narrowing of this scope of education, students aren't able to engage in some of those other activities. I've seen countless schools without classes like home ec, wood shop, auto shop, countless schools without them. And it's a very, very sad moment because students who are interested in art, theater, music, don't have access to those things, and certain students end up thinking that because what they're talented in is not provided in the school, that they're simply not good at school. So we have students that just think they're an academic failure because they aren't exposed to things of interest of them in the schools. And I think that's a major failing of the way the budget cutting and budget setup is happening right now. I think it's a really big issue, and that it's unfortunate and very sad that students aren't having access to those things, because I know for myself, I really enjoyed that, and that was one of my favorite parts of attending school when I was a child.
Definitely. Even I remember, having home ec class and enjoying it. And it really is a shame that a lot of these, um, you know, activities are, being cut out because for, not a lot, but some of these kids, it's an outlet because they might be having problems at home, problems at school, and that's how they can productively, um, it's an outlet for their frustration, and now you're just simply cutting that off and saying, telling them to deal with it.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, is there any type of uh, uh, racial aspect to or class aspect to this standardized testing and kind of just the way it goes about? Um, because we're seeing a lot of uh, schools are being shut down are in Black and Brown communities, and when it comes to standardized testing, for example, we look at the SAT, right? You know, you have uh, you know upper middle class and upper class kids whose parents can afford all the the tutors and the books and stuff like that to you know uh, teach their kids and to make sure their kids are ready. And then you have kids, like me, I come from a lower middle class background, and uh, me and my mom, when it came time to study for the SAT, we went to Barnes Noble, we got a book, a large book, to study from the SAT, the best one we could find, and that was it essentially. So is there any like class or race aspect to this? Are people being disproportionately impacted due to these standardized testing?
Absolutely, yes. As you said, there's a huge impact on Black and Brown communities. And the achievement gap, while all the politicians will massage the data to make it look as though things are improving in their personal districts or states or whatever it may be, there's not much headway being made as far as increasing access to resources for students who don't have those economic resources at home. And it's really discouraging to see students that want to learn but don't have that opportunity because their parents don't have the means. And it's a big issue when it comes to the college application and college admissions process. I don't think there's any way around it, and I don't think there's any way to address it other than integrating those services into our public school system completely and fully, integrating those SAT prep courses completely and fully into those schools so that way every child has access, not just students whose parents have the economic means to expose them to it.
Definitely, I agree with that because if we, want everybody says they want, like politicians are saying that they want, such a good America, for the future, and they're so focused on the future of having a strong America, and in order to, have that, you're going to need to have everyone have good education that actually benefits, having that strong
It's
America that
true.
they dream
And
of.
I'm sorry, it's true. And it's very discouraging from an educator standpoint because it almost feels like it's a purposely set lather, rinse, repeat cycle. So to continue to oppress those already oppressed communities and to continue to allow people with access to those resources to keep that access and to remove competition from to those resources as they move from children to adults.
I agree with that, 100%. Everybody, education is extremely important, and we view it as a great equalizer. So let's actually make that a reality. Any last words?
Other than that, I'm looking forward to significant change, not necessarily in the form of race to the top and the Common Core standards, but real meaningful change in the education system that I hope I'll see in my lifetime, where students truly have access to equal facilities, equal resources, and equality and equity in their education that will prepare them for whatever life path that they choose, and that they make those decisions because they're informed, not because they're in a particular set of circumstances.
All right. Oh yes, but and before we fill in, I wanted to ask, what kind of groups are out there that are fighting against standardized testing, and like how can people get involved?
The main group out there fighting against standardized testing at the moment is the opt out movement, which you can look up online. It is a group of parents and educators who are in the process of attempting to boycott standardized testing. The educators, of course, are mandated to do their jobs and they fully support whatever initiatives that their schools have. However, the parents involved in the movement choose to, quote, opt their children out of the test, meaning say to go up to the school, tell the principal, I'm withdrawing my child from standardized testing for this year. I do not want my child to participate in those tests. And the more parents do it, the less emphasis the school will place on the standardized testing craze. So much so that there are schools that I know of, even in the New York City area where I'm from, that the schools have phased out the testing and are adopting different instructional methods and assessments because so many parents have opted their children out that all of a sudden the data that would be produced from the maybe 10 or 15% of the remaining students becomes irrelevant. So the more parents that get out there, the less likely the school is going to be placing emphasis on the testing, and the better the breadth and scope and creativity that will come to your child's classroom.
All right. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you for having me, Devin.
Yep. See ya.
Take care.